You ready, Alan?
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
Okay, Alan, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. And it's such an honor and a pleasure because you have a wonderful, wonderful book. And let me say the full name of that book. It is Southern Man, Music and Mayhem in the American South. How long did it take you to write that book?
Actually, about 3 years after I sat down and literally got into it. I had started several others that I discarded, but this one about 3 years.
Wow. What was it about the other ones that made you discard them? You didn't think
I didn't think that I wrote them very well. I just thought I could do better.
What's your process like as an author? Because I am speaking to a music business legend, but you had decades of telling artists, that's not good enough. You could be better. So you saw everybody else's creative process. What's yours?
Wait a minute, I didn't get your last.
He asked, what is your creative process as an author, like doing your videos? And
well, it just gave me a chance to tell my story. I've always had been the guy in the background, letting my brothers be out front. And so it was good for me to be able to finally come out and tell my side and my views on what was good, what was bad. And it gave me a great release just to know that I had finally said what my story was,
Yeah. When you started in the music industry, very few managers were kind of public figures. There was Colonel Parker, there was Berry Gordy, but usually we didn't know the people behind the curtain. Were you afraid with this book to kind of come out publicly like that?
No, I was actually glad that it was happening. I mean, I was very proud of the work that I had done, and it was finally a chance of me being recognized for doing a lot of things that other people had received credit for, and I knew in my heart, wait a minute, I did that. It was my work that brought that part of history, Mm-hmm. And so it felt real good to me. I mean, it was just for my moral, my spirits, it just made me feel real extra good,
Yeah. Well, one of your famous companies, Hustlers Inc., I don't think anybody used the term hustler before you. Do you predate, not just Larry Flint, but hip hop using the term hustler all the time?
Yeah, well, see, I named my company Hustlers before there was a magazine.
Yeah.
And what Hustlers meant was hard worker in the field, term to use the words, let's hustle, And so that I named it that, and then the magazine came out and kind of gave it a slanted interpretation of what hustler may have meant, It was before hustler meant a prostitute or any of the dirty stuff,
Yeah. So going back, you spent 3 years about writing the book. So what's your process like? Were you talking into a recorder and transcribing it or writing by hand?
Well, a lot of it I videotaped me talking, and that was my easiest way of putting it down. And some of it, I like late night, I would write while I was in bed, so a lot of it was just written from my thoughts,
Did you have a hard time remembering a lot of stuff? Did you need visual aids or to talk to people, or did you just have it all up here?
Mine pretty well came from all over there, I down on Broadway, which was where my office was. They called me Long Wind because I could tell so many different stories, and I had a lot of exciting stories in my life, and they were very entertaining. even with the book out there, I've been asked now to do a speaking book where I would actually tell the stories myself. A lot of times that I put a lot of emphasis into it that doesn't make it on pages, you know. And but it was a thrill for me to write it. I thoroughly enjoyed it, you know.
One of the areas where you had a lot of success was in publishing. Most people don't know what publishing is. How did you get to understand publishing? It's very complex.
Well, you know, in our days, artists and managers did not publish a lot of books or songs, you know. So it was, I was one of the pioneers that came in and actually got it down on paper, and people liked it, you know. When I write different stories, they always had plenty of comments on it. And it did me good to make me feel good to know that the audience itself was getting it firsthand from me. And it really made me feel special with it. I started learning the publishing business when Otis Redding re-signed with Vote Records. You know, my brother actually came up with the asking for part of the publishing. At that point, I didn't even know what publishing was, you know, and he came back from Memphis and told me, said, well, we got this and we got that. And then we got part of the publishing. And I was like, what the hell's the publishing? What do we get? Why didn't you get cash? You know?
Well, you published the Lynyrd Skynyrd catalog, so Freebird and Sweet Home Alabama. Was that the first catalog that really took off for you, or was it Otis Redding's?
Well, I learned it with Otis Redding. I mean, you know, we published Dock of the Bay and Respect, and I've Been Loving You Too Long, and there were a lot of hits with Otis. That's when we realized how valuable publishing could be, because we started receiving these very nice sized checks.
Yeah.
But by the time I opened Hustlers, it was Lynyrd Skynyrd was my first group that I published all their songs, every one on the first two albums. And of course, then there was Sweet Home Alabama, which did pretty good for me. And Freebird still lives on today, you know, and Give Me Three Steps. And I had an awful lot of good songs in my catalog, you know.
If I've done my research correctly, you retired in 1999, but all these artists you worked with, the music still matters 20 plus years later.
Right. Well, I tell you, you know, we kind of picked the groups that we thought would go on for a long time, you know, and Lynyrd Skynyrd was, what was so funny was Lynyrd Skynyrd was probably the most mispronounced band in history. We won worst album cover of the year for 2 straight years. And, you know, all we cared about was what the music was inside that sleeve, you know. And I never cared much about what the album cover was, as long as we knew we had the guts in the middle, you know. These guys were, you know, guys that rehearsed. They went to rehearsals like ordinary people go to their jobs. I mean, it was, you know, it was 5 days a week, from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And they were probably the most rehearsed band that was out there on the road. Mm-hmm. And they even played their solos identical. I mean, they were note for note, and they were just a super talent, you know. And when I heard Freebird, you can imagine my feelings. I was like, wow, man, that song there is getting it, you know, that's getting it good. And all of their songs, I sat down with them in the beginning. I said, now don't be writing songs about living in London and Paris and drinking champagne and eating caviar. I said, talk about being in the damn swamps and talk about drinking whiskey and beer and talk about what you are in real life, write about what you are, you know, and they handled that real well. And Ronnie was the second most prolific writer I had. Otis Redding was the most prolific, but Ronnie Van Zant was the second. I could give him an idea for a song in the morning, and by that evening, he'd call me up and play me a finished song, you know.
Wow.
And he was just super talented.
Yeah.
Plus, he was one hell of a band leader. Ronnie ruled Lynyrd Skynyrd with an iron hand. If they messed up too much, they got a good whooping. I mean, you know, they were a fighting band. If they weren't fighting with somebody out in the public, they'd be fighting among themselves, you know.
Wow.
I knew of one incident where Ronnie backed himself up in the corner and says, I'm going to whip every one of his ass all at once, one at a time. And they all jumped him at once, and he still whipped them all. He had the fastest hands of anybody besides Ali. And he was not a real tall guy, but he'd jump up in the air and hit down on you, you know. And when he hit you, you knew you got hit good. His knuckles were actually in dentures where he had been in so many fights. He had street fighters' knuckles, you know.
Did he write music on the piano, or did he just hear the songs in his head?
He he didn't use a piano or guitar. He always had someone with him to play those, you know. He just stood there and spit out the words, you know. And all of them fell right in a row. I mean, Ronnie's word was the law. I mean, it was, and he was their inspiration too. Some of them had not written before they met him, and he inspired them to write. Yeah, well, we had the whole band practically wrote. In fact, they all did write something somewhere in the songs, you know. But it was interesting to watch them write, you know. I went down to Jacksonville for a rehearsal. We were getting ready to play with the Who, first American Who tour in years.
Mm-hmm.
Super important. Everybody in the world wanted that Who tour. And my booking agent, Alex Hodges, and I did a super job of securing that Who tour. We knew Pete Rudge was flying from Atlanta to New York, and I planted one guy on one side of him, and I planted another one on the other side of him. And Ron Delson was one of them from New York. And
oh yeah, I remember Ron Delsner. He's still around.
Ron Delson told Peter, "Oh, I played them, man. They are incredible." He had not played them at all. He had never even heard them, but he did it as a favor to me, you know. And the other one was Tony Ruffino, who had played them in Birmingham, and he went on about them. But they pounded him all the way to New York. By the time he landed in New York, Lynyrd Skynyrd had the Who tour, and man, that was the boost that they needed. That actually was what broke the band wide open. We had sold a lot of records in Atlanta because we had a following in Atlanta, since that was the one city we played a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Who tour broke us nationally. I mean, there was a situation where police had to beat the fans off the stage with billy clubs to get them to get off the damn stage. And Freebird excited the masculine side of a guy. And we could count on there'd be several fights break out after Freebird out in the audience, you know, and they just had a tough following, and they lived up to it, you know. These guys drank like we drink Coca-Colas, you know. Yeah, I bought a fifth of whiskey to take down to rehearsal with me one time, and cracked that bottle open and said, "Well, you got some ginger ale, Coca-Cola or something?" Chase with it. "No, man, we don't need that." They chugged a little bit right out of the bottle. That bottle of fifth of whiskey was gone in a matter of minutes, and they had already sent out and got two more.
They say that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, they say that Lynyrd Skynyrd was the first band to open for The Who where they didn't get booed off the stage.
Yeah, they you know, we said when we went into rehearsal, I said, do not have more than a 3-second pause between songs. Don't give them a chance to clap you or to boo you, because most acts would get booed off if they were the opening act for the Who. You know, I mean, they'd boo you right off stage. Well, we didn't give them a chance. As soon as one song slammed down, another one kicked off, you know, and we always got a tremendous response from the audience, because it was all tight as a tick, you know. And that was a real experience, as a learning experience. Bear in mind, they had been playing bars that held maybe 800, maybe as many as 1,000 people. And all of a sudden, the smallest audience is 18,000 people, you know. And so they, by the time they finished that tour, they were a headliner in their own right. They could go out and headline packages themselves. But they were a true Southern spirit. Mm-hmm. They loved each other, and they defended each other. If one got in a fight, the whole band fought with them, you know. And most of the time, Ronnie finished it for them. I saw him one time. There was a guy that must have weighed 300, maybe 325. Big, huge guy. And Ronnie I'd given him a bottle of Chivas Regal Scotch because it was the Who tour. Mm-hmm. And I'd bought him that bottle of Scotch. Well, this guy was a bouncer in the club. He saw Ronnie walking around with that bottle of whiskey in his hand. He just walked up and snatched that bottle of whiskey out of Ronnie's hand, and went walking back by the bar. And Ronnie turned him around and says, "Hey, man, you ain't nothing but big, that's all." Says, "I'm going to rip your dick off and I'm going to stuff it down your throat." Give me my damn whiskey. And snatched it back out of his hand. But that guy didn't make a move. I mean, if one swat from the guy that big would knock somebody with a loop, but not Ronnie. It didn't scare him. He would take on. He'd take on anybody. He one time he got his ass beat, and he turned around and I told him, I said, "Man, I can't believe you got your ass beat." He said, "Alan, it wasn't the first time, and it ain't gonna be the last." You know, I mean, that was just the way he was. He was a true street fighting man, and you know, for him to perform barefooted, that was kind of unusual. That really represented the South there. And he just, he knew exactly what to do to rile that audience up, you know. And they'd get standing ovations almost everywhere they went. Mm-hmm. And if they didn't, there was something wrong with the audience. I don't ever remember them not getting a standing ovation.
I can imagine.
Except in the bars. In the bars, they did when they were before the hit record, you know. But then I had the group, the Outlaws. You know, they were a powerhouse. In fact, I still work with the Outlaws today. Henry Paul and I are very close friends, and Henry, I felt like was done wrong in the Outlaws. They fired him just as the band broke big. I mean, they had 2 hit albums, and they wanted to go more rock and roll and less country. So they fired Henry, and man, it you could tell it broke his heart, you know. But I stuck with Henry through the Henry Paul band. I still supported him and treated him as if he was just as big as he was when he was in the Outlaw. And of course, now he's the leader and the last living outlaw, you know. Monty Yoho is still alive, but he's not on the road anymore. But if you can imagine having Outlaws and Skynyrd, I had the 2 guitar armies. You know, each one of them had 3 guitars. And you know, when I first suggested the 3 guitars, Ronnie told me, says, "Oh man, they'll be stepping all over each other, and it just will not work." I said, "You won't know until you try it." And of course, they tried it, and it clicked. It worked perfect. You know, they came out with the Legion of Guitars, the guitar army from Florida, and the Outlaws came out, and they had 3 guitars, and so we made a lot of noise with that. And having the 2 of them on tour together was fun time. I'm talking about hell raising and playing the Beacon in New York, and they stuck together like a family, you know. And Henry Paul is still one of the nicest guys in the world. He was probably the toughest of them all because he's big and has a big fist. And but he was always the nice one, you know. He always helping me in different ways, and even after I had left, Henry used to still call me on Sunday afternoons sometimes and just shoot the bull with me for a couple hours, you know. And he is now, I think, 74 years old, and he's got him 4 or 5 kids, you know. And he leads the band very well. And he's loyal. That's the main thing. He's a very loyal person.
Well, another thing that I really like and respect about you is how you kept your business around Georgia and Florida at a time when the whole business was New York and LA. How did you know to keep everything around Georgia?
How did I get what?
Well, how did you know that Georgia would be an okay place to do business as a record company and manager?
Well, it just kind of happened that way. I mean, both Phil and I were, my whole family was raised in Georgia, and one time, you know, we were offered offices in New York, and guy offered to buy James Brown's house in New York to give to Otis if he'd move north. He asked me what I thought, and I said, "I think you ought to stay with the people who helped you get started." I said, "I think you ought to stick with them since they're the ones that stuck with you when nobody else did." And he stayed in the South, and he kept a dynamite image here. He wouldn't, Otis and I never ate in a white restaurant in Macon, Georgia. We never did. He said, "I don't want anybody to be calling me a uppity black man, you know."
Yeah.
And we go to black restaurants now together, you know, but he was very conscious of wanting his hometown people to love him. And we had a yearly annual homecoming show for Otis. And it would sell out, boom, minute the tickets would go on. And we'd have people standing outside still trying to get in. And they were crawling through the air conditioner ducts and things like that, where if somebody turned the air conditioner on, it would have chopped them up. They were climbing high power electrical poles to get to the balcony and jump off. And it was like a war for us to keep people from sneaking in. You know, we had to, in those days, you had to keep all the doors unlocked because of the fire law. You know, that in case a fire did break out, you didn't want to have them all padlocked up. And so we had to hire a policeman to watch that door. But then we had to hire a guy to watch the policeman because he would let people in. And then I hired another guy that walked around and checked on the guy watching the policeman. But we ran successful shows. I mean, people didn't care about the Black artists as much until we got into business. When I say care, they loved them as fans and things like that, but they didn't go out of their way to make a Negro feel as important as a white person, you know. And we did. I mean, we treated all of our artists with mutual respect. Once that word got around, more Black musicians flooded to us rather than going to New York, you know, because prior to us, you know, people figure if they went to New York, New Yorkers would understand the Black man, and the Southerners would be too busy trying to cause some trouble, you know. But we ended up taking them all later. I ended up with 55 African-American entertainers at one time. And that was bigger than Barry Gordy's Motown management. And the difference between his and mine was he only let his acts go out on the Motown reviews and do the package show. Well, my acts worked 7 days a week if it was up to me. You know, I mean, the more they work, the better they get. And less trouble do they get into if they're busy working.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had quite a family. A couple of them didn't get along real well, but the majority of them all got along extremely well, you know. And you don't get a better person than Percy Sledge and Otis Redding. I mean, Otis Redding became my best friend in life. And when he moved around Oak, Georgia, I moved around Oak, Georgia next door to him, which I was still a mile away from his house, but I was his next door neighbor. I taught Otis how to hunt and fish and ride horses, and he taught me how to write songs and how to structure songs. And it was just fun time. I mean, Otis laughed the majority of the time. You know, he had a couple of times he got I caught him crying, and I was his good listening ear for things like that. He brought his personal problems to me, and but you know, we worked very well together. You know, I would have been on that plane, but I had what they call blocked sinuses. And I was flying with him from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, down to Jekyll Island. And when we'd been flying at something like 12 or 13,000 feet, we flew through a tornado to start with. That was a lot of fun. I mean, the planes falling 400 feet at a time. Oh. And it sounded like a shotgun when it hit the bottom of the air pocket. But we made it all the way down to Jekyll, but when we started going down, my sinus is blocked. And it's like somebody driving a nail right in the forehead, boy. And I had stood up and was about to kick the window out on the airplane because I thought I was suffocating. And the pilot saw it, and he immediately took me back up to the where we'd been flying, the heights we'd been flying. And then he took 2 hours to bring me down real slow, a little bit at a time. But it grounded me from flying. And because of that, I wasn't on that plane when he flew to Madison, Wisconsin. And just different things happened, that were miracles to me. I mean, I lived a charmed life.
And still are living a charmed life, and hence this excellent book that we've been blessed with.
Yeah, well, I tell you, I was just a blessed human being that I didn't have any more trouble than what I did. And Sam and Dave were a little different from Otis. We went to a freedom rally in Philadelphia, and Dr. King and Rap Brown and a lot of your heavyweights were speaking that day. Well, there was only 3 white people there, and one of them was a dark-skinned Jewish guy, so he could pass for a mulatto. Well, Sam and Dave went off and left me. I went to get in the limousine to leave, and they had already left. And when I went to go back inside the auditorium, the stage door man had already locked the stage door, so I was stuck on the outside of the building. And this angry crowd is beating up everybody white in the vicinity. And I was scared to death. I mean, walking through that crowd, I prayed to God, please let it be a gun. Don't let nobody stab me, please, And I'm walking through that crowd and I'm praying. I really thought I was going to die. And all of a sudden I heard a voice call out, Alan, and way away. And I was like, damn, is that you, God? I mean, are you calling me God? And I'm going to get you out of here. And I recognized it then as Sam and Dave's old road manager. He was in his late 50s, early 60s. And he had gotten out of the limousine from Sam and Dave on the damn freeway and waved down a cab and came back to the place to find me. And he did find me and did get me out of there. But when he hollered out, Bo had a gold tooth. It's a star. And when I was looking for where the voice was coming, the moonlight was shining down. It was hitting that gold tooth. And I could see that gold tooth beaming up my way. Bo, is that you? It's me, Alan. I'm going to get you out of here. And he did. He got me out of there, and I even had my first suite in a hotel at the Ben Franklin Hotel in Philadelphia, and I couldn't go to sleep at all. I ended up going across the street and playing a pinball machine all night, and couldn't stop winning games. I think I left it with 180 games or something. But I came home and I resigned from the company. That was the scariest I'd ever been. And the fact was that Sam and Dave liked to play jokes on you, Another time they hung me out of a 7th-story window of a hotel by my ankles. And I'm thinking, man, my shoes gonna come off or my socks pull off. And I'm gonna splatter all over that pavement down there. And needless to say, I was scared. And he got me back in. Well, that's another time I resigned. I said, "The hell with it! I'm not going back out on the road with these guys. They're crazy." And they all thought it was funny as all get out, and it wasn't funny at all when you're hanging out the window. So anyway, we ended our relationship with Sam and Dave, and Otis had been killed, so the spirit of soul music kind of left our stable. We started going towards rock and roll. Phil found Dwayne Allman. I found Boz Scaggs, and we had two pretty good ones to start off with. And when I left the company, my brother and I had begun having some difficulties getting along, and I left the company. I went out and auditioned 187 bands. Now that's a lot of music, boy. I mean, if you imagine each one of those bands playing a set.
Ooh.
And I went all the way back to band number 13. And that band number 13
Lynyrd
just happened to be Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Yes.
I changed my lucky number from 5 to 13. Every time I saw 13 all in a contract, that was the one I signed.
Well,
But
your book is just full of great stories like that. I can only urge everyone to read this book and not only be entertained, but get a sense for some history that wasn't fully documented or was inaccurately documented. So thank you, Alan, for what you do, and thank you for what you did.
well, thank you so much for the kind words. I loved what I was doing. After the Lynyrd Skynyrd, the Outlaws came my way, and at one time I had the Outlaws and Skynyrd together. And I said, "Man, I got the 5 hottest guitar players in the world. I mean, they are smoking, And of course, I had a separation with Lynyrd Skynyrd, and I stayed with the Outlaws. Like I said, I still work with the Outlaws today as far as public relations and trying to keep the name out there, promotion.
Mm-hmm.
But I thank you for those words. They touched my heart.
They are meant, and I thank you for your time, and I look forward to whatever is to come from you in the future. But really, thank you again for your time, Alan.
Well, thank you.
Paltrocast.